Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just back from Newcastle, having conducted the funeral of Jim Speers there this morning. And again, I know many people from our church will remember Jim well. He is a member at Carnmoney for many years, and he used to attend the 9:30 communion service, although latterly, because of his health, he's been unable to get to church. But it was a real privilege to be asked to be part of the funeral this morning. And it took place at Jim's hometown, Newcastle, in St. Colman's graveyard. And it's a lovely setting down there. It was a beautiful day for a start, but the graveyard is nestling into the foot of the Mourne Mountains. So it was a beautiful sort of setting for the day. And it was lovely, actually, because it wasn't a council funeral. It was in church graveyard, which meant that a lot of the council regulations weren't necessary. So quite a large number of people gathered. There's probably 60 or 70 people there, including all Jim's family. And we also weren't restricted by time, which was brilliant. So we could spend a lot of time remembering Jim as well. And again, I'm sure many of you, as I said, do remember Jim. Just a little bit about his history. He came from Newcastle. He was born and brought up there. And he went to St. John's school there. And he was also, as a young boy, involved with the Scouts there in the town. On leaving school, he went to work in a photographer's shop, but soon got a job when he was 18 with the retained fire service. That was a part-time job, but it led to a full-time job working for the fire service in Lisbon. But again, his life was to change when he met Nancy, his wife-to-be, in 1954. Nancy was from the south, but was nursing in Newcastle. And they were married 2 years later in Lisbon Cathedral, and they lived for a short time in Lisbon before moving up to Glengormley. In 1957, Jim joined the RUC. He worked there for 11 years, but it was during the years after his marriage that the 5 children were born. And the whole family went to Carnmoney-Parish-Church. The children remember attending Sunday school there and being brought up in the Christian faith in that church. And Jim was always very, very proud of his Anglican upbringing. He loved the traditional 9:30 communion service. He was always sort of very reverent when he took communion. I remember that. And again, in recent years, when he couldn't get to church, it's been a great joy for Carol and me just to bring him communion in his home. And we'd often sit and chat for quite a long time before and afterwards. Carol remembers his firm handshake. I remember particularly, I think, his lovely smile, which he always used to greet you with. But he always just loved listening and talking to you when you visited him at home. I know Heather and Sharon from our pastoral visiting team have also very much enjoyed the visits they've had with Jim there. After working for the RUC, he went to work for Securicor, but he also went back to Polytechnic and he got a degree in personnel management. And then he became the personnel manager for Securicor there for many years. Very tragically, in the 1990s, Nancy, his wife, developed Parkinson's disease, and Jim retired early just so he could care for her at home. And he faithfully cared for her until her death in 2003. But he did also set up his own business selling fire extinguishers as well. So he was on the go all the time. But he was much more than just his work, Jim. He was involved in many different things, had lots of different interests. He was heavily involved with the Scouts throughout his life. He helped to set up the troop at St. Bridget's Church, and he led that for many years. And he was also involved with the Army Cadets in helping out there. He was a very keen gardener. He grew all his own vegetables. He loved just pottering around in the garden. And he also was very fit. He used to go to the gym regularly, right into his mid-80s, until he couldn't go anymore. But he kept himself fit and healthy. And he was a very quiet man, a very serious man. but also a great listener. And again, his children talked to me about the ways that he never really told them off. He always just sat them down and asked them if they could have gone a better way about doing something. He never told them what they should do. He just helped them to really work out the ways forward. I know he really appreciated his family. He always talked about his family when we sat down and talked with him. I know they came and provided meals for him and just looked after him very faithfully. And again, he's been very proud of his grandchildren, also great grandchildren, I know, in these later years. And he's really appreciated, I think, the care he's received at your hands as a family, but also from the church, as certainly Sharon and Heather and others have visited him. These last years haven't been over easy for Jim. Again, he had a fall around Christmas time and he broke his shoulder, which was awful. He'd had trouble speaking before that and walking as well. But he went into a nursing home in Carrick just to recover from his broken shoulder. And it was there that he moved to Glen Abbey Nursing Home. And he settled really well in that home. He really liked it there. And again, he took part in the monthly communion services that we led there for a couple of months. My last conversation with Jim was just before he went into hospital. It was just after the lockdown had started. And he rung me up at home and asked me if I could just drop into the home 6 of the prayer booklets that we'd sent out with the magazine to all our members, because he wanted to give them out to his friends in the home who had been admiring them. Again, just I think very, very typical of Jim. He was someone who really practiced his faith. As I said, he loved his Anglican upbringing. He did make his own personal commitment to Christ in the last year, actually, of his life, which I know was a great joy to his family. But he did very sadly catch the coronavirus that really devastated Glen Abbey. Many of the residents there caught it. He ended up in hospital, and although he fought his way back to health, they did discover that he had cancer, which couldn't be operated on. And again, it was there in hospital. He was able to sort of communicate with his family through FaceTime. But he did pass away there peacefully in the early hours of Monday morning there in hospital. So we gave that tribute really to Jim this morning. And then his son Alec, rather than myself, preached. He used 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 to 5 as his text, really just talking about the offer of eternal life and the need for us all to make our lives right with God. We then prayed and committed Jim to the ground. But again, he was a lovely man. I know everyone really appreciated the impact that he's had on their lives here at Carnmoney. I know his family will greatly miss him, but he is now at peace with God in that place where there's no more sickness, no more pain. And I think, as Alex said, he wouldn't want to be back with us experiencing those joys of eternal life. So this is just a short tribute to Jim. And let's all remember him. Let's please pray for his family, pray for his children, pray for Rosemary, for Andrew, for Alex, and for George and their families in the days ahead. God bless.